In this video, we're going to be looking at part 2 of the IELTS speaking test. And specifically, we're going to be focusing on how we should be planning for this part of the test when we're actually in the test. Now, of course, you know that in part 2, you've got to speak for between 1 and 2 minutes on a topic card that the examiner will give you. And you get 1 minute to prepare your answer. You get a pencil and a piece of paper to make some notes if you want to make some notes to help you. And you really need to know how to use this time well so you can prepare well and speak well when you have to speak in this part of the test. A lot of students do struggle with this because it's not a long amount of time, right? It's only 1 minute that you get to prepare, and this can be very difficult. It does take a lot of practice to get used to using this small amount of time to prepare your answers. And there's certain good techniques to use, and there's probably some certain bad techniques to use when you're preparing for this 1 minute. And of course, what I wanted to do in this video is just show you a really good way to prepare in this 1 minute. And it will take a bit longer for me to go through this technique than just the 1 minute, because I need to kind of show you and explain to you why this is a good way. But with practice, you can use this kind of technique in that small amount of time and kind of cover everything that we can cover in this video in just that 1 minute. But it does take practice. And I really want to kind of show you the way in which we can do this and why it's a really good idea and why maybe other ways are not such a good way to be kind of using this 1 minute preparation time. So we're going to be using a specific topic card here. One that is actually in one of the Cambridge books where you've got the practice tests. So this is it. This is the topic card we'll be looking at. And you can see it's asking you to describe something you did that was new or exciting. And that's the line we get along the top of the card. It's always asking you to describe something, of course. And here it's an activity that you did in the past. And then we've got those 4 cues underneath. What you did, where and when you did this, who you shared the activity with, and explain why this activity was new or exciting for you. So this topic card is going to help us a lot in our preparation or planning time. And of course, what we really need to do here is think about each of those points one by one and go through them step by step. The reason why we'll do this, and when we're speaking, we'll follow these ideas step by step, is because we want to have a nice structure to our speaking, right? We don't want to speak kind of all over the place and maybe be repeating ourselves a little bit. So we need to really be going through it step by step. So in your planning time, you will start with that first cue and think of an idea. That's what we're going to focus on first, right? At least one idea for each of these individual cues. So maybe if I just give you a quick example for each of these cues, what my idea would be and exactly what I would write down if I was making notes with a pencil and a piece of paper. So for this first cue here, what you did, of course, I've got to choose that activity really quickly, as quick as I can. And hopefully I can use one of my prepared ideas to use in the real test as well. But here for me, this idea would be rock climbing. So this was a new and exciting activity that I tried. And of course, that will be the key idea. Now, I'll just write that down. Literally, it's just 2 words. Now, of course, when I'm speaking and describing this, I will expand and go into more detail when I'm speaking in the test. But I've got time just to write down that idea to make sure that I focus on that. When I look down, I know at my note, when I look at my notes, I can remember that and start speaking about it and going into more detail. Now, of course, then I need to think about the next cue, where and when you did this, and come up with an idea for each of these things. I mean, it's 2 things really here, where and when. So, of course, I can write down the location, which was a climbing center. So I just write down those 2 words. And then when? Well, last year. And of course, I've got those 2 main ideas now. When I'm speaking, looking down at my notes, looking up, talking with the examiner, I will then go into more detail and explain this, right? Expand on those ideas as much as I can. But I don't have time to write down any more than that when I'm making notes, right? There's no point in trying to write down a full sentence in that 1 minute planning time. You're never going to have time to do that. It's just going to slow you down. So writing down those main ideas that is going to kind of help me to kind of explain things to the examiner. And then we've got that 3rd point there, right? The 3rd cue on the cue card. Who you shared the activity with. So this is the person. Well, all I have to do is write down that person. Who was it? What's their relationship to me? So I would write down a close friend, right? A good friend of mine. And of course, I would go into more detail on that, but the idea is there. So I'm not going to get stuck for an idea or panic when I look at that cue when I'm speaking in the exam room. So that's the first 3 points. And of course, I would follow that order when I'm speaking for the full kind of 1 to 2 minutes. And then I've got that final point there. Explain why this activity was new or exciting for you. Of course, really here, I've got to give a reason why, right? And I think here I can just write down the word challenge because it was a challenge for me. And that's why it's new, right? I've never done it before. It was exciting because, well, it's not easy. It's difficult, right? And that's why. So I've got the word challenge there to remind me to talk about that. Of course, I will be explaining this and going into more detail. There's no time to write down much more detail than this for the main idea. Now, that process should be pretty quick to just come up with those quick ideas. As long as you've prepared well for the test and you've kind of already thought about some of these ideas about activities before you go to the test, we should get down those 4 ideas pretty quickly. And of course, if you have time, right, after you've got down those kind of 4 ideas for each of those 4 cues on the task card, good thing to try and do is write down a bit of vocabulary for each point that you might want to use. Again, not a full sentence, but just some key words that you want to remind yourself to use that you can kind of impress the examiner with a little. So if we go back to that first idea for the first cue, which was what I did, which was rock climbing, we could think of maybe a phrase or a word that we can use when we're describing that activity or, well, the place where we did it as well for the next point. But here, maybe the words that I could use here is maybe artificial rock walls. We're just explaining what it is and what we're doing. We're climbing up these artificial rock walls, not real mountains, right? These are artificial rock walls, but a nice little phrase there that I can remind myself to use, a good adjective and noun collocation there. So something I can remind myself to use when I'm going into more detail on this activity. And then, of course, thinking of ways to describe the climbing center, or last year when I did it as well. Thinking of some vocabulary I can use when I'm expanding on this idea. And here, maybe I could use some words to describe the climbing center. Maybe some nice adjectives. The word huge, a slightly less common adjective that we can use. It just means big, right? But it's a nice word that I can remind myself to use to describe that climbing center. Also, when I went there, the people were very nice and friendly, so we could describe the climbing center as being friendly. So huge and friendly, 2 words that I can use and to when I'm kind of expanding on this idea when I'm speaking in the test. Then if we look at that 3rd cue and 3rd idea I had was about who I did it with, and that was a close friend. Now I'd need to be able to expand on this, and the word I could use to describe that friend is experienced. Okay, and by using that word, I'm saying that, well, that person has done rock climbing a lot before, so it was useful to go and do it with that person because I could rely on them to help me with it. But the word experienced, I want to make sure I use that nice adjective to describe that friend. We've got to remember that part 2 of the speaking test is kind of looking at you trying to use this kind of descriptive language. Remember, it's a describing task. The more good adjectives we're using, the better, really. So there we go. We got that bit of vocabulary to fit that idea of a close friend. And then finally, we had the idea of why the activity was new or exciting. And we had that key word that we wrote down for the idea, which was challenge. Well, it was a real challenge. And again, we want to describe, well, why it's a challenge, and we could think of some vocabulary to explain that a bit. And we could use words like, well, the activity needs flexibility, strength, and endurance. 3 nice words there. Actually nouns, but we can change them into adjectives when we're speaking. Well, you need to be flexible. You need to be strong. You need to kind of endure a lot of physical activity here. So to have endurance as well. But some nice words to kind of explain why this kind of activity is very challenging. So I've got those kind of key words written down to kind of look down at when I'm in the test and kind of remind me to use those words. Now, here you can see we've got the ideas first, and then after that we write down a few bits of vocabulary that we want to use as well. And really this is the process we want to go through when we're planning. Follow the task card, go through those 4 cues, write down an idea for each one, and then if you have time, write down a bit of vocabulary you can use when you're explaining that idea. And hopefully with practice, you will be able to do this and go through this process in the space of just 1 minute. Now, of course, it's not easy, and it takes time and practice to be able to do this. And at first, maybe you'll only have time to write down a few ideas and you don't get to the vocabulary. But with time, you can get better at this and quicker at it. Of course, in this video, it's taken much longer than just 1 minute because I'm trying to explain things a bit. But if I was in a real test situation and I had to do it, then I think I could get these ideas and vocabulary down in the space of 1 minute. So this is really, I think, the best way to be preparing when you're in part 2 of the test. You don't have time to do any more than this. You shouldn't be trying to write down full sentences or thinking about grammar that you want to use when you're speaking, right? It's mainly here just focusing on ideas, and if you have time, a bit of vocabulary. And then when you're speaking in that 1 to 2 minutes that you have to speak for, you can use those notes to remind yourself of what to talk about and help yourself to keep moving forward, to follow that structure of the task card, which is going to make it much easier to listen to for the examiner. So it's going to improve your coherence, but also it's going to help you to avoid repeating yourself at all. You're always moving forward to the next idea, right? Or the next kind of bit of vocabulary that you want to use and show the examiner. So that's the idea of this. That's why we're kind of using our planning time in this way. It's an efficient use of time, and it's the most you can do in that 1 minute. But do remember, when you first try using this technique, it's probably going to take more than 1 minute. It takes practice, right? The more topic cards you look at and you prepare in this way, limiting yourself to 1 minute, the better you get at it. And of course, actually using that planning to give your answer is another skill, right? That you need to be able to practice, to look at that cue card, to look at your notes, and to be able to talk about it fluently. Now, in the next video that we do, I will be giving a full answer following this plan. So there'll be a sample answer that will use these ideas and this vocabulary in a nice full answer, so you can see a good example of someone following this plan that we've done at first, that we can imagine we would use a similar kind of plan when we're in the real test, and follow that plan when we're giving our nice full, probably 2-minute answer there. That's the thing. We've got enough ideas there to really fill that 2 minutes if we expand on them well, right? Remember, you've got to expand on each idea before you move on to the next one. But there we go. I hope that's kind of useful to think about this planning stage. And of course, I have other videos that I've done with other kind of topic cards that you get in part 2, where I've talked about the planning for those. So if you haven't seen them, it might be useful to have a look at them too. And of course, there are old sample answers that you can look at too, that I've done videos for. But in the next video, we will be looking at a full sample answer for this topic card about this activity of rock climbing. So there we go. If you have found this video useful, then remember to click the like button. It does help. And also, if you don't want to miss out on future videos, especially the next one that's going to be the sample answer to this task, then remember to click the subscribe button as well. But there we go. That's it. I'll see you in the next video.